You're watching City Channel 4, your window to our community.
This is the Who Do You Read panel for the Iowa City Book Festival. The Iowa City Book Festival is presented by the Iowa City UNESCO City of Literature. We would like to thank the sponsors who made this event possible. The sponsors who made this event possible are the City of Iowa City, the University of Iowa, the Iowa Arts Council, Sheridan, Iowa City, the Iowa City Public Library, the Iowa City Coralville Convention and Visitors Bureau, and Iowa Tourism. The panelists today include, I'm going to try and read these in order, so maybe I'll start with Alice Yousef on my left, a poet and translator from the Palestinian territories. She publishes poetry on her blog, Blooms in Indigo, writing on the Middle East, the Palestinian experience, and the emotions of daily life. Mariano Tenconi Blanco, next to her, is a playwright from Argentina. Among his awards is the first prize for new playwright given by the Buenos Aires Ministry of Culture for Everything. For Everything Would Make Sense If Death Did Not Exist. Vivek Shanbhag is a fiction writer and playwright from India. His writings have appeared in Granta, Seminar, and Indian literature. His most recent novel, Gochar Gochar, appeared in English in 2016. James Brooks is an interdisciplinary scholar of the indigenous and colonial past and the recipient of numerous national awards for scholarly excellence. His latest book is Mesa of Sorrows, a history of the Awat Ovi massacre. Finally, Galit Dahan Carlibach is a fiction writer from Israel. Her several books include the YA series Arpelea and two novels, The Locked Garden and On the Edge, which won the Prime Minister's Prize for Hebrew Writers. We have a loose format. I think I'd love to hear first from everybody, and then we'll have time for questions and talking across. Alice, would you like to start? Are you good?
Certainly, yeah, I'm good. Thank you. Thank you. To be able to read in one language is great, but to be able to read in two languages is a blessing. I'm a person who's blessed with the ability to speak more than one language, which has been very helpful and very informative in my readings in general, because I'm able to read in both languages and able to think in two languages. My native is Arabic, my second tongue is English, and both languages have put me in different cultural and different perspectives of the cultures behind the books or the languages that have been produced. I grew up reading quite a lot, which was a little bit unusual for the area I was living in and for the circumstances, since there was a lot of distractions. There were TVs, there were Game Boys being introduced everywhere, and that would have compromised the reading time I grew up to do. But I remember, I'm going to start with a little bit of a story. When I was 10, my mom first took me to a book fair and asked me to pick up two books, and I just pulled out the two that looked most interesting to me, and they were Jane Eyre and Moby Dick. And this is what I first started reading. And I was reading the Arabic translation of the English originals for both of these books, and sort of they stuck with me for my entire life after that. When I was able to grow up and actually reread them in English was really interesting. But in general, my reading varies and is very diverse. I read across many genres. There are things that I consider out of my reading interests, like I don't like to read horror, and I don't like to read pretty much just horror. But mostly everything else that falls in the format of a book is something that I'm interested in reading. For a long time, I was my first introduction to reading, or the books that really, really made me think, were the things that I got in translation, and they were the first things that I'm consciously aware of also reading is Love at the Time of the Cholera. and Gabriel Garcia Marquez's books have been having a big effect on my life and introducing this element of magical realism. But what I became conscious of reading later on and nowadays is that I really enjoy reading people who have a mixture of identities or a mixture of cultures within them. For instance, Khaled Hosseini and Elif Shafak are two of the people who, when I read them, I say, why can't I write like that? These are the people who spark that kind of love for literature most for me. And books like The Kite Runner, The Bastard of Istanbul have stayed for me for the longest time possible. Of course, being a child and having diverse readings, I got to read the classics, I got to read the fairy tales, so I try to keep it open with who I read, but mostly the people that are in between, the bridges between two cultures or two identities, are what interest me most in my reading life. And this is how I got interested in that. Another point that it was striking to me because I wasn't aware of it until I looked back to my Goodreads a few days ago and realized that also the books that have been staying with me for a while are books that have the strong female presence in them, the strong female authors that aren't necessarily easy reads at all. For instance, Edward Danticat's Breath, Eyes, Memory was one of the books that I've been recently reading and rereading, and it was strikingly very powerful for me. Shimon Nagoya Ashidi, Half of a Yellow Sun, that was also another strong presence for me. So this mixture of culture, power of characters, power of writer also carries its way across my reading. I think I'll stop here so I can allow other people to express
Wonderful.
a little
We'll
more.
come back to some of those.
Certainly.
A lot of great books.
Thank you.
Well, hello. My name is Mariano. I will read a very brief text in which I will talk about fiction based on reality. I am against that hypothesis of fiction. For me, those kind of books are fictions or plays. Obviously, I'm not against history books or non-fiction books. I also love those kind of books, but not fictions based on reality. And at the same time, I will propose an author that I loved, and he will be my reply to the question, who do you read? It's just 3 minutes, maybe. So maybe if it's boring, we'll be short. First, knowledge became information. Then, television, the internet, social networks built the empire of what is real. Everything is real. What is real has devoured everything. First information, then fiction. Today, the counterpart of the cold news channels are the warm fictions of the real. The aesthetics hypothesis is the same. What matters is what is real, forgetting that it is a construction. In this way, literature only makes sense in relation to its social, political, psychological, and human value. This way, literature is not sufficiently important so as to be valuable in itself, but the only revolution which an artist should aspire to is the revolution of form. Therefore, today I am here to talk to you about copy. Therefore, today I will talk to you about the writing of happiness. Copy was born as Raúl Damonte in Buenos Aires in 1939 and died in Paris in 1987 from HIV. He was a writer, an actor, and draftsman. He wrote plays, novels, stories, and comics. What do I call the writing of happiness? That fiction which has value for itself, just as fiction. It does not need to be justified by anything external. The characters have nothing to do with people. They are crazy and incredible fiction stories. Rats speak, dogs smoke, crabs pour down as rain, presidents are zombies. But the stories shouldn't be misunderstood. Copy is not allegory. These inventions do not intend to be lessons. Copy is read by reading it. Copy is pure fiction, concentrated and infinite. Copy has nothing to do with the theater of the absurd or post-dramatic theater. In copy, there is always a story, but again, the value is not in the events, but in the way the story is displayed and the operation which that story generates over time. At the same time, space as well, considered as a continuity, frees itself in copy. In his place, the characters enter holes which later becomes an entire city. In his place, the dead do not get up when the show is over. They get up in the middle of the show, and the show continues. In this way, copy's characters explode. Time is dislocated. Space goes insane. It is pure invention, pure creation of a world that only exists in copy. I will narrate you the plot of my 3 favorite plays of copy very fast. Eva Perón, 1970. Eva Perón is a transvestite. She does not have cancer. Perón is a ghost. He is always having migraines. Eva Perón has to die in order to be eternal. She decides not to die and runs away with her groans and jewelry. His nurse, a loyal devotee of Perón, dies in her place. This way, Eva does not die, because what does not die is the image of Eva Perón. This way, a life becomes real. And what else is Peronist if not this? Eva does not die because she is eternal. Loretta Strong, 1974, following the Argentine writer César Aira. Loretta Strong is the wonderful astronaut who travels alone in her capsule to Betelgeuse to sow gold. She makes love with rats, bats, ghosts, gold bars, and even a fridge. She is the last survivor of a cosmos at war, the tireless telephone speaker who chats with all the voices of the universe. Furthermore, it is a children's play. Cachafaz, 1981, following the essayist Daniel Link. There is a couple in a tenement, Cachafaz and Raulito. Outside, the neighbors recriminate them a life founded on another moral. The police knock on their door. One time, another time, Cachafaz and Raulito will kill the policemen that are after them. They will slaughter them to feed the neighborhood. Leaders of a cannibal revolution, Cachafaz and Raulito also represent the scandal of genders. We know that, in the universe of copy, God is, or can be, a transsexual. That basic and initial transsexuality is surely monstrous and defies all the systems of categorization. The image of God as the image of man in copy is the image of a transvestite or transsexual, and that is the theater of the world from which copy can think his art. To finish, just a brief conclusion. Turn off the television. Do not buy the newspaper again. Start reading copy. God is a transvestite. The world is a monster. Literature makes war to the real world.
My experience is something similar to Alice, where I grew up with multiple languages. And I'm from India, and it is so diverse and there are so many languages. I grew up with four languages.
Wow.
So, and I used to read a lot. And when I was about 15, 16-year-old, I thought that to be a writer, one has to go travel around the world, gather that experience, and write. And today I'm going to talk about 2 writers, one from my language, which is Kannada. It is K-N-N-A-D-A, not Canada, Kannada, which is one of the South Indian languages. And it has an unbroken literary history of over 1,000 years. It's a very old language. So I'm going to talk about a writer who is from Kannada and how he influenced me. I also want to talk about another writer who is not from Kannada, who is Isaac Bashevis Singer. Oh. So I'll talk about these 2 and how they influenced and how they, what I got from them. First, the Kannada writer, his name is Chittal. Only one of his books is available in English. You wouldn't have read. There is very likely, there's no chance that you are going to read also. But that's not the point. The point is, when I was a 15, 16-year-old, I came across his books. I used to read a lot at that age, 2-3 books a day. And then he is from a place which is very close to my hometown, where I grew up. And we have a very similar background, similar language. And when I read him, I suddenly realized that one can write stories with something that you see around, because his stories were set in that village and in that small place. And the things that I every day saw became wonderful stories. And that was quite a revelation to me. And I wrote a letter to him. And then he responded, saying that he's going to visit that place in about a month's time. And then, if I wish I can, meet him there. And he is a writer who has based most of his stories and novels in one place. It is something similar to Faulkner basing that in Yoknapatawpha. So something like that. And that village was very close to my hometown. And on a day when we decided to meet, I went to that place to see him. And he lived there only in his childhood, and then later on he moved to Mumbai, which is one of the biggest cities in India. So we arranged for this meeting, and we went there, and I was very keen to see the places where his stories take place. And at that time, I was very impressed by two of his stories. And one of that is about an innocent girl, 15, 16-year-old girl. Her name is Abolina. It's the name of a flower. And she has lost her mother when she is very small, and the father is bringing her up. And a crook in the village forces himself and kisses her. And then tells her that, look, my saliva is on your lips and you are now pregnant. And she's very innocent. She doesn't know anything about it. And she believes so. And then later on, this crook goes to the priest in a church and makes a confession saying that, look, I'm so sorry this girl is pregnant. And then this is how he marries her. And there is a scene in the story where the father of this girl is asked to go and meet this priest, and where all these things are revealed to him, and they come to an agreement that this young, innocent, beautiful girl is married to this middle-aged crook. And then he comes back from the church and goes down the steps, and with such heavy heart, and it's a beautifully described scene. And I felt that those steps were endless. So I wanted to really see that church and that scene. Then there is another story where an old man travels from one end of the village to the other end of the village, and the story is about death. And it is in the evening, a rainy day, pitch dark, and the only light is that of the lightning. And he stops every 5 steps and waits for the lightning to see that, see the road, and then he walks. And this is how the story goes. So I also wanted to walk, that road. And I met him, and he took me around, and we went to see these places. And I was so disheartened to see this church, which is a small little building, and there were only 3 steps, which looked like enormous, endless things. And then I walked on that road, which was not even less than half a mile, which had. Which was the entire story and that whole journey of this old man from one end to the other end of the village. But I think I learned something very, very important that day, and it has stayed with me till now. It's all about, what is literature, what is life, what is reality. All these things that the many theories that I read about much later, about, literary time and literary space, I experienced it firsthand. And I think that is something I consider the most valuable experience of my writing life. Because it is not just this, not just about the things, but how the mundane that we see, and how a writer can see beyond that, and how they can. You can see these 3 steps, and they become such exotic things in your stories. So it is this, that ability to see beyond and see a story there, which I think is my biggest learning. So that is that. Then I also want to say a few words about Singer, whom I come across when I was 20 years old. And I came across a collection of stories called A Friend of Kafka and Other Stories. And he is a writer who is, some of you may know that he is from Poland, and because of the trouble in the country, then he migrated to the United States, and he lived here for the rest of the life. But most of his stories are based in Poland and in one particular place. So when I read him first, I knew nothing about Jews. He's a Jewish writer. And there were half the things that I did not understand, because it was completely new to me. I grew up in a very small village. I had no exposure to whatsoever. Other than knowing that the Jews exist, I knew nothing about them. But these stories attracted me so much. And I felt that there is something about this writer, and this is something about literature, because even if they are placed in another context, another religion, another way of life, details completely unknown to me, but there is something which still strikes. And I think that's the quality of great literature. And I also realized that when you open a book, it's like you are entering a new world. There is a new character, there is a new religion, there is a new language, there is a new conversation. So I really experienced it with Singer, and and from then on I pursued him. I pursued many writers. Singer is one example, but I pursued him all my life, nearly now 30 years. And I went after him. I collected books after books and read him and reread him and reread him. So there is a world that is inside me, which is given to me by Singer. It is also important to me because he has written in Yiddish, which is a language which is a very small language, not known to many other people. It also gives confidence to a writer like me who writes in a language which is not so well known outside India, and which means that you can still write in a language which is spoken by very few people and still create great literature. So Singer is very inspiring from that perspective. There are many other things. He has also talked about translation. He has also talked about why he has been writing about Poland, though he left it when he was in his 30s. But let me keep that aside for now and allow others to speak. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank you all for being here. I think I may be the only nonfiction writer on this group for the most part.
Many people write more than one thing.
Right. Well, I've written 2 bad novels and a lot of bad poetry, but so I consider myself a nonfiction writer because I can actually get published in that form. And I'm an academic appointed. I hold a position at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and write kind of between the boundaries of history and anthropology, primarily about indigenous and colonial society in the Southwest of the United States, and have had some success with that. But most recently, I actually took the chance and the venture of destroying my career by publishing with a trade house instead of an academic house, which all of my colleagues oh, you're publishing with Norton. Oh, they sell books. And no self-respecting scholar would ever imagine that their job is to sell books to people who actually read them. And it was an amazing experience for me because I worked with John Glussman, the editor-in-chief at Norton, and I got schooled up one side and down the other by one of the great editors, developmental editors of the world. And I discovered that really, writing is about language and grace and power and force and affect, and it's not about patting yourself on the back on how many sources and footnotes and how many citations and how many kind of genuflections toward the historiographical ancestors you can possibly make. It's about capturing people's imagination and bringing them along in a story about the world that has motion to it. So that was incredible, and I had to unlearn almost everything that I learned over 20 years of academic writing, and it was a great experience, and I'm hoping to continue with that. But one of the things that really liberated me while I was writing this book, Mesa of Sorrows, was that my editor said, don't read scholarly literature because it'll kill you, because you'll get that same cadence and that same kind of rhythm, that deadening, mind-numbing kind of academic rhythm in your head. And he said, just read, anything. Just read poetry, read novels, read anything but academic literature. So I did, and it was an incredibly great experience. that I found myself, this book finally was great because I actually drove my editor nuts. He said, I'm reading your book, and it's like giving me whiplash because it's not chronological. I'm not following. It's whipping back and forth in time and space. And I said, you told me to read. So I read a lot of Louise Erdrich. And Louise does not stay linked to chronology. She's like, she's in the 17th century, the 15th century, 21st century, back and forth. And I said, I decided I would try that. And then I later found out there's actually a fancy academic word for that, and that is that this is anachronic history. So that kind of killed the joy of having thought of that I had discovered something. I also, there's something about imbuing really simple places with powerful affect and meaning. So I love reading Ivan Doig, Kent Haruf, how anybody can take a shitty little small town in the eastern plains of Colorado, where I grew up, and turn it into a place where huge, big human things happen between simple people. It's like, that's a great, great gift to me. And so I love reading Kent's work. Just for the power of language, I read a lot of Faulkner. I read a lot of Flannery O'Connor, I love the notion of the grotesque, the Southern freaks, because it kind of liberates you from writing history with like people that aren't like people, because history is full of freaks, and I write about awful stuff. This last book is about like a massacre among Hopis, the most peaceful indigenous people on earth, and they destroy one of their own villages like in a single night, blood everywhere. So that kind of like the Southern grotesque was fun for that. I'm trying to think. There's an amazing Swedish poet, Malena Morling, that I read a lot because of her economy of language. She's the Transtromer's selected translator before he passed on. He had worked very closely with her, and now Malena will be doing all of his translations. And that's that kind of extraordinary power and economy that Transtromer has, Malena Morling has as well. So I don't know where I go from here. Actually, I'm working with my agent on a new book that I think is going to be like creative nonfiction. I didn't even know that existed until somebody told me that that's an option for writers, where you can like borrow from some stuff that's real and make up the rest. I was like, ooh, that's fun. That probably won't get me anywhere in the academy, but it'll be a fun experiment. So anyway, I'm honored to be on this panel with all you like real writers that make stuff up all the time. So keep it up. Thank you.
Stalingrad of Anthony Beaver is very good.
Yeah.
It's very creative.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. I'm Galit. And actually, I'm very selective in food. Because of this, I'm very, very starving in Iowa. But I'm not selective at all of books. So for me, it was very, very hard to talk about which books I read or who do I read. And maybe I wanted to introduce a very amazing writer from Israel and from the local literature, and then I will choose from the international. But I just want to say about the selection books that when I was a child, so in the 80s, many books in Israel were translated very bad, because the government want us to be very educated. So, for example, Pippi Longstocking of Astrid Lindgren, this is my favorite book. It's translated to, so Pippi, it's P in Hebrew, okay? So the government was very afraid on our education. So that translated it to Gilgi, okay? So Gilgi, it's my favorite book. Or for example, Don Quixote, so Chaim Nachman Bialik, the international poet of Israel, he translated it from Russian, and then he took off all the fantastic parts of this book. So it's left only 20 pages from Don Quixote, yes. Or Master and Margarita, yes, of Bulgakov. So half of the book reduced. So for me, we really weren't selective when I was a child. We took every book on the shelves. We read many books, and I think it's good because Nabokov says that our good writer need to read everything, the negative and the positive, so to know how to read. And we know about Don Quixote that he's about Cervantes. When he wrote Don Quixote, he read a lot, many books of stories about knights and princess, and it was grotesque, and yes, it's very funny. But I want to choose a unique writer in Israel. She passed away. She died. Shulamit Har-Even, and she is, and Aaron Appelfeld still lives. They're, I think, the best writers in Israel, and they're very different one each other, but the common things between them is that their attitude to the languages. The language for them, this is material. They very respect it's economical, this is a word, I mean limited, very short. For example, this is, I brought it from the library, a Miracle Hater of Shulamit Har-Even. In Hebrew, it's thinner. Look at this out in English, and English is longer. So it's very thin. She's very concentrated, and she had the tendency to poshlost. Now Vladimir will like this. Poshlost, this is a Russian term that Nabokov coined. And it's about kitsch and about fake that you can find even in good literature. So Shulamit Har-Even and Aaron Appelfeld are not faked. Every word, it's like curve from the stone, and you read it and you can see the whole word. It's amazing. So I just want to read I want City of Many Days, but I didn't find it yesterday, so I brought something else. Just few sentences, maybe you can taste it. I cannot understand these sentences, but it's in Hebrew, it's beautiful. So I hope that the translator wasn't like the translator of Gilgi and Pipi, and you know. They kept living all the time, one from a town, two from a family. They fled the settled districts of the land of Egypt to join those who had left before them. They did not go far, no farther than the nearest oasis or the first gully that had a spring. They sought only to put the sand between themselves and Egypt, to get away from its lords and officials. No more than that. This is a beginning. It's very concentrated and I like it. So I want, nothing very relevant, in nowadays, the story about Elena Ferrante. So this is also a thing that I love in Shulamit Har-Even, that also was a journalist and also was an essayist. So I think this is what's happening now. It's very rude and very bad thing about Elena Ferrante. I mean, it's like she's murderer and someone needs to reveal her past, and who is she? And this is really the meaning for me of literature. I don't really want to know who is the writer. It doesn't matter for me. And even I can add, even as a Jewish woman, because I know that Dickens and Dostoevsky and many writers were very anti-Semitism in the writing, and I love them, and I really ignore about it, what they think and what you know. So Shulamit Har-Even, in one of essay, I quote, wrote about a wonderful sentence about the literature. Literature begins at the place. I'm sorry, I need to read it. Where is it? 1 minute. Yes. Literature begins in the place where the diary ends. And this one wonderful quote, it's really what I want in literature. And it's very funny for me because Elena Ferrante, all the people think, we know she came from Napoli and she wrote about Napoli. How do you say Napoli in English?
Yeah.
Napoli.
Naples sometimes.
Yes, Naples. So we know that she came, and now if they revealed indeed the real character, so she not from Naples at all. Yes, she come from Germany or something like this.
I don't want to know.
Okay. Yes. So it really doesn't matter. So this is what I like also in Shulamit Har-Even, that she really was good essayist and didn't think about this.
Can you spell the name?
Shulamit Har-Even.
Yeah.
Shulamit, Shulamit. Har-Even, it's the last name. It's Hareven. Yes, and from the international literature, I choose. There is so many. I don't like to be selective, but I choose Michael Kolas by von Kleist. So, and Oedipus. I like it because it's talk about. I like kind of literature because it's talk about the righteous people, and the good people who try to prove the God that they are so good, and then the destiny kicks them out of the game and say you're nothing. So I like kind of this literature. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. I have several questions, but they can wait.
It's fine.
If there are any questions from the audience. All right, I'm curious about this metaphor, this ongoing metaphor of scale, that we see the whole world through literature. That books are somehow, what we experience in books is of a very different, much larger sense than reality. The staircase is only 3 steps. The road is short. What we read was long. Kent Haruf's Colorado town is small. That somehow these very small tools. Life seems small when you start talking about books. Is that some sort of trick of the light? I mean, do you feel like life is small? Like, we're all writers, right? We're in literature for a reason. Like, we like to read, we like to write. Do we have a distorted view? Like, do we get more out of books than most people? You know what I mean?
Yes.
Can I?
think.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know. I think that maybe we should say what is useful about literature, because we don't want to be lazy people. So for that reason, we are always creating senses. But I don't know, because I'm really afraid of talk about what is the importance of literature, and maybe in a world in which you should be productive, when you are losing time with a computer, just inventing ridiculous things, that's very subversive in a way. In the other way, I think that literature, or at least the literature which I love, propose new ways of reading the world, and that makes the world bigger. So I think that's really good. And maybe being more honest, I think that maybe we are writers because we want to read, but you can't be a reader. So for that reason, we say, no, I'm working. I'm reading because I'm working. And but maybe in the end, the only thing that we want to do is to read peacefully. But well, sometimes we show our text because we want to continue reading. But that's for me, I guess.
I hear you.
Yeah. I think it is not that we imagine it. My take is that it is so in our life as well. For example, most of our relationships, they happen in our mind. Yeah, it is not the physical that happens. For example, if you say there is a walk that you have taken with your girlfriend and you think that it is a life-changing discussion that you have had, it could be only 5 minutes walk. But that experience of that walk in your mind is probably hours and hours, right? So I think literature deals with that space. And it is between the reality and what we experience. And that's why it looks bigger, it looks longer, it looks exotic. I think it's, I don't think we make up. That's how we are.
Alice, did you want to?
Yeah, I think following on what Vivek has mentioned, the thing that gets the power for literature is that it's very emotive. We don't realize how emotional we are involved when we're reading a book, and that opens up the whole different world of how we see places. Often it's a tiny town or a book that can take a span over like a day or two, and the compact of the emotional versus the spatial, and it all just goes in our minds. We're not totally conscious of it, but after a while we just realize, well, yeah, it's more than we have imagined it, and this is such a huge world that we are so wrapped up in this little place we're in that we get lost once we open the book, basically.
So what does that, how does that play out with, say, canonical thoughts, the books that are accepted as forming the consciousness of a culture to a certain degree? Do you feel like, all of you talked about reading outside of what would normally, or even remotely be considered a canon for, maybe not Mariano, you didn't have a chance to, but I mean, you were reading world literature. I mean, that's at a fairly young age, and others have talked about writers from outside of their culture. And do you feel like that's an important way to get, if it's this daily space, if it's this daily emotional space, and yet we need writers from everywhere to help us understand it, it seems a little bit of a contradiction, right? Like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, we live inside of our little, I live inside of Iowa City, and I meet people here, but it's only through reading people from all over the world that space becomes larger. It's like I have to outrun what I've been taught to think in order to see what I'm experiencing. Does that make sense? No. Well, we'll go to it.
No.
You want to say? I'm not sure that I understand completely the question, but if does it mean that if the writers can understand the reality more than not writer?
Yeah. Well, I was trying to get it.
Not writer people.
I was wondering if there's a relationship between the emotional life
and the reality.
And canon, and the books that you have to read versus the books that you actually find inspiration in.
But canon, it's something that became a monolith after many years. So now we have canon. So,
well, right. I guess what I was I was thinking about what James was asked to read by the editor, like, or by your friend. Like, you need to clear your palate. Right. So you need to go learn how to write. So here's a series of books, and you named, several writers that would all be considered canonical writers in this literary tradition. But then I also heard so many names that couldn't have been canonical where you were growing up. I mean, Singer isn't canonical in southern India, is he? And yet he changes the perspective. Marquez wasn't canonical when you were growing up.
Of course, yeah.
So I was trying to relate how these books that are coming from outside of what you would normally read are also expanding what you're experiencing emotionally and what you're. Does that make sense?
It does make
Actually,
sense.
what you say really makes sense, because see, once you start reading, after a point, it does not matter where the writer is from. The details are only to give you that context, right? For example, you must be knowing about this incident in Kafka's diary, where his father tells him to go and die. Yeah, so it's just some 3 words that he says, I want you to die, or something like that. But they were not mere words, right? And by the time you read them, you know that it's like an order. So there is something that is built in. Similarly, you see Tolstoy's, there is a story called Family Happiness. It's a novella. And the young girl is in love with her father's friend, who is an elderly man. And then there is a whole description there. And there is a point where she has to tell him that, I love you. And you feel that at that point in time, there is nothing else but that sentence. Right? Yeah. So I'm saying that it is it doesn't matter in what context, what detail, what country, what culture. Literature, I think, is something that goes beyond all this. I mean, once if you have an eye to look for it, if you have a taste for it, I think it all comes alive. It just doesn't matter whether it's in your own language or in another language. Yeah. And coming back to your canonical question, I really have not experienced it because I'm not a student of literature, by the way. So I read whatever came across and whatever I liked, and I just discovered these writers on my own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
About your question, I was thinking, well, I'm an Argentinian writer. I cannot do anything against that. And our most important writer was Jorge Luis Borges, and he wrote an essay that was very important for writers after him, in which, being really short, the thing that he said was, we from Argentina and maybe all Latin Americans are in the same thing. We are not a central culture. We are a marginal culture. So for that reason, we can use all the world's culture because we don't have a strong culture or a strong tradition as French or England, America also. So for that reason, we can use all the traditions. Because in the end we will continue being Argentinian. So I don't have any problems related to that, and for me it's the same thing to use an Argentinian writer or a foreign writer, and I use the verb use because I do that when I write. And related to the emotional relationship between the books and my life, I don't know. I think that in my personal case, my life is not really interesting, and there are books that I read are really interesting, and so maybe books are, say, my life or something like that.
Ezra Pound said that literature is news that stays news, and I'm wondering about this effort to investigate the canon or the canon of a particular culture as opposed to the politics of the culture, and if it's an attendant, where each of you would put your work or your understanding of literature, appreciation of literature in terms of understanding the news of your culture or of a culture as opposed to the politics of the culture. And there is a relation, but one is, when does political writing become utilitarian, and when does not doing political writing become avoidant? And is there something different than, something about finding the news in a culture that's different than finding the politics? Where is that really? And I'm asking because it's really a question. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I may not have this opportunity to get that sorted out again.
Did anybody have thoughts about reading to get the, you want to say the cultural or emotional news as opposed to the political newspapery news?
Right, there's some news that we're all going after that's in all cultures, that we're doing cross-cultural readings. I'm hearing I'm writing this list of all these people you're suggesting. And I suspect that what I'm really going after is what's the news in all these different cultures. So it's necessarily yours that you're writing about or other people's, which seems different than a political struggle.
News meaning
like TV.
Contemporary events, yeah.
Yeah, so Ezra Pound, he called poetry the news that stays news. But you want to start, or do you have any ideas?
Yeah, I could start. Basically, in a lot of what you read across cultures, you will find the news and you will find the politics in both, like both ends. Much of my writing is informed by the politics as well, of the places that I've been living in and that I've lived in, and it's mostly at home. And reading, this is how the two languages that I was speaking earlier about informed my reading and my views of the world around me, because what I was reading in Arabic was a totally different level of understanding the world that I was actually living in, and that what I was reading in English was understanding the global views and how people have been through different struggles, how they lived their lives, what happens where in the world, and how that shapes the entire culture and dealing with that. So it's they both feed into each other. The politics feeds into the news, and poetry feeds massively on that. And I agree with the importance or the power of poetry to stay for a long time. It just stays with you, despite how varies or how variant it is on the political level. So if it's totally political or unpolitical. Mentioning that, I just realized that I totally forgot to speak about any of my local favorite writers, which kind of informs a lot of what I read. And one of the books that I was really touched by for a long time, it's by also an alumni of the IWP. Her name is Sahar Khalifa. She's Palestinian, and her two books that were really, I think one of them is not available in English yet. It's called My First Love in Arabic, Hub al-Awwal, and it deals with the historic period, with relationships with people when there was also the context of war outside, and understanding the internal relations and struggles and the external relations and of a woman who has been living abroad all her life, then moves back home and then struggles with the place that has become completely different from what she's learned when she was growing up. And then someone from her childhood, her first love, comes back as an older man who's sick, who needs someone to take care of him, and she takes him in, how they go back to the past and what happened when she was growing up as the revolutions were ravaging the country around her. So this book was really informative of how inside-outside work. And the other one is An Image and Icon in a Convent. It's available in English, of hers. And it's totally set and based in Palestine. It's based in a convent where a woman, it deals with the pregnancy of a woman who's Christian from a person who's Muslim, and the complications of that, and how her child ends in a convent, and how everything around her and around him and around his life reveals the whole wider scheme and the wider picture of the political and the personal. So it's the political and the personal that mingle together that interest me most. And this is how I end up reading these stories that are bridges between two cultures, because it ties into something I'm familiar with and goes across the board.
I want to say something about it. If you refer to politics as, you can find politics in everything. You can, in relationship between man and woman, baby and mother, mother to mother. You can really read Madame Bovary and think about the relationship and the politics between man and, But I think that the first point that when we talk about literature needs to be in the artist. And I will bring examples. For example, by the way, because you write documentaries, yes? Things. Not non-fiction, yes. So Antony Beever's Stalingrad is wonderful. But for example, there is a very awful book that we were forced to read when I was younger in the school about the Holocaust by Katsetnik. He was survivor of the Holocaust, and I cannot blame him because he was freak. So he wrote very, very graphic book about the Holocaust. It's really, it's very bad. It's like porno. It's like porno. Now this is a news. This is a politics. He didn't invent nothing. But if you will go, for example, to wonderful and really artist Varlam Shalamov, who writes Kolima stories. I translated from Hebrew, so I don't know if it's Kolima stories. Yes, Kolima stories. It's amazing. He writes about his experience in the Gulag, and you can see that it's not that everybody can write it. So before the politics, need to be writers, and I can tell a little story. When 2 years ago, I was required to be tour guide. I'm tour guide in Jerusalem of Iranian writer, She was Catholic, she escaped, and then she wrote a book, and her book was published in my publisher house. So I was her guide, and she was very nice and very kind. And after the guidance, I was curious about her books, so I asked the publisher to send it, and then I prayed all the way to the post office. Please, I want to love this book. Please, she's so kind. I want to love this book. I want to love this book. And then I took it, and from the first page, it wasn't good. Why? Because it was exactly like many, many, many books that describe the rape. And this is amazing things. This is disaster. This is huge. This is not something like, it's something very, very big. If you talk about it, it's about politics, about disaster, about humanity. But it wasn't artist. It was like cliché. I read it. It's like Without My Daughter of Betty Mahmoudi. Yes? You know what I'm talking about Iranian, Without My Daughter by Betty Mahmoudi. So it's like a copy of this. So I think that experience literature need to be unique. So it doesn't matter if you write about daily life in Israel, and we have a lot of drama. In every building in Israel, you have a lot of stories. He is from the Holocaust. He is shocked after the Kippur War. It's a lot of stories. But if you are not artist, so you cannot tell this story. This is my attitude about it.
Can I say something related to Galit?
We need to wrap up, but I'd love to get some responses.
Well, being here in America for 2 months, I found great American writers, some of new writers. But I think that mainly I found that for publishers here in America, when they're interested on a foreign writer, for example, if you are from Israel, you should write about Holocaust. You can't write about UFOs, and for that we have the American writers. So for that reason, I'm not a fan of this fiction based on true stories and so on. Because, and I think that mainly, obviously not everybody, but mainly when an American reader will read a foreign writer, is expecting to know more about the horrible things that are happening in their countries.
Thank you.
Can I last comment? Yeah?
Yes. Yeah.
I think this is a very important question. The news and politics. It is the quality of news, the newsness is very important for a work to resonate in another mind. If that quality is not there, it is very difficult to capture your imagination. So that is, I think, is the first thing. Politics is something that we can't escape. And again, that's another thing which is, because any work that is, however rooted it is in its local culture, if it has to go beyond, then it has to depend on politics. And when I say politics, in a very broad sense. For example, I'm sure the American writers now, after this election, their narrative and their experience will be completely different, because this is something, even for a person like me who is unconnected and come from such far distance, I get so disturbed by looking at what's happening here. So definitely that politics is of a different thing. So the impact of this will be seen not tomorrow, but maybe 10 years later. But it is certainly there, and that news quality will still be there. Yeah. Thanks for that question. I think it's a great
will
question.
be realism.
Yeah. James, I haven't had a chance to ask you anything directly. Did you want to comment at all about how creative techniques have allowed you to bring out the news of the history that you wanted to document?
Well, no, my only comment on the news and creativity is that I know over the last year the quality of my kind of social media literature has collapsed because of the news we're having to live through daily. Like, I am so tired of my friends cross-posting to each other the same freaking politics they already talk about. Like, let's give it up, guys. Like, we know whose side everybody is on. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about real stuff for a change. So that's not the news I carry. But I think this whole question of why do we read outside and, kind of exotic and different locales, these small stories, because what we discover is that no matter what the locale, there's like these remarkably unifying human stories. That there's only 4 plot lines in the world, right? I think.
Maybe
three,
so.
Maybe only three. Right? And so we all just rework them at the local level, and that's what makes it really exciting to me, is why can you take these 3 or 4 plot lines and make them entirely fresh in a new location, in a new language? That's magic.
Well, please thank our panel.